abilities, and anything you could imagine at your fingertips pretty much at any time.
It's like a huge party, huh?
It's pretty much, yeah, like a big party, definitely. And there's all these different camps. Each camp typically has kind of like one, if not more, events that maybe they're responsible for. Not responsible for, but that they bring and give as a gift to the community. And so that's often in the form of like a party, or it could be a pancake breakfast, or there's this one night, it was like middle of the night, looking back, it was probably 2 a.m. And there's this, it's called Playa, which is basically this like big space, and there's a bunch of different art cars and all these things going on. And my partner and I were riding our bikes, pitch black, going deep through the Playa, trying to make it to another art car. And all of a sudden there's this flashing light, and it's really vague, and I smell burnt cheese. I'm like, what the heck? So I kind of turn my bike around and I go look. It's this one guy on this like little stand that kind of almost looks like a surfboard with a intentionally vague flashing sign that says, Holy Church of Jesus Christ. And he's making grilled cheese sandwiches.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's his gift to the playa. You know, it's just, I don't know, it's like so hard to describe it. It's just a bunch of lights and music, and yeah, I guess one big party is an easy way out of describing it, but doesn't really capture it.
Sounds like more of it's like a party, but it's less so what I usually think of parties as, in everyone getting really wasted and doing something stupid, where it's more of giving and receiving from other people. And that's nice.
There's definitely still the getting wasted, you know, on a lot of people's accounts and doing stupid things, but yeah, it's a little more community feel.
A little more community. So again, thank you for taking the time. I thought you'd be perfect for the podcast. Why don't you take me about 5 minutes or so and just kind of go through your life story a little bit. I know you can't sum it probably all up in 5 minutes, but go through it a little bit and kind of where you're at now.
For sure, yeah. The way I think of it is there's like a lot of long stories that I'll try to put into one short story.
Nice.
But basically, so I was born and raised in Southern California, Orange County to be exact, in a small beach town called San Clemente. And then I was the first child to both my parents, and pretty much at the age of 4, started playing tennis. My dad had enrolled me into a class. Story goes, I really enjoyed it, wanted to keep going. Obviously, I don't really remember. So I kind of did these group clinics once a week. And then at the age of 7 or 8, I actually was just talking to my mom the other day to try to get this fact right. But at the age of 7 or 8, I enrolled in my first tournament, and actually ended up winning the whole tournament.
Oh, nice.
I thought I only won the back draw, and my mom was like, no, you won the tournament. I was like, oh, great, even better. And so pretty much from then, it's kind of when I think the bug really hit. And I do remember that moment, like really clearly. I remember having my trophy. I remember driving home, holding my trophy in my hand as I like laid back in my dad's passenger seat. And then pretty much at the age of 11, I had my sights set on going pro. It became my entire life. That's when I started to play pretty much every single day. Would kind of have to be forced to take a day off, and played multiple hours a day. I, at that time, really envied Steffi Graf, so my game kind of was emulated after her, but also I wanted to be like her in the sense of I wanted to be number one and I wanted to win Grand Slams.
Be number one.
Yep, exactly. And then age of 12, I got my first college scholarship. And at 15, I had to determine really if I was actually going to go pro or go to college. If I was to go pro, obviously I'd forego my college eligibility. Luckily, I chose the college route. And I skipped a grade when I was younger, so I went to college a little bit earlier. I just turned 17. And I chose Arizona State. Go Devils.
You go Devils.
And I joined them. Sheila McInerney was known as being one of the top tennis coaches in college tennis. And they were always, ranked in the top 25, so a really prestigious and prominent team. But hadn't really, won a national championship or, really excelled to be one of the top teams. And I wanted to be that person to kind of come to a school and help them to propel to the top. We did pretty decent during my 4 years there, making it to the Elite Eight. at one point. And then my senior year, my doubles partner and I won a national championship, which is probably honestly one of my most memorable experiences in my career. And then after college, I pretty much knew I was going to go pro. So I actually missed my college graduation to go and play my first pro tournament, which was in Portugal. I flew off with my tennis bag in a way too big of a bag stuffed with clothes.
Yeah.
I had to learn the hard way. But I thought I was just going to pack, for months and months. And pretty much from there I embarked. I played on tour for about a year or so, really all around the world, most of my time in Europe. And then after about a year and a half, my dad took a big decline in his health. He had Parkinson's disease, was diagnosed when I was about 12 years old. And my sister had some difficulties with school. So at this point, it was kind of family first, and I wanted to go back and be with both of them at this time. And then from there, it kind of sparked a lot of interesting journeys where I went and taught tennis in Hawaii for almost a year to a lot of the really wealthy businessmen and their families, which was actually really cool.
Yeah.
And a great experience. And then I also coached some junior players. I coached a couple players that were on tour. I became a teacher at one point. I joined Teach for America. I did a 2-year commitment with them in Richmond, California at John F. Kennedy High School, teaching special education and kind of in California, special education as an all-inclusive model. So I also taught like English and math as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I continued being a teacher for 2 years at a private school called Cardinal Newman in Santa Rosa, California. And then I kind of hit like what I call a panic moment, which was, what am I doing with my life? I have no idea what I want to do or where I'm going. And I quit, and I went back to what I knew and what was kind of the easiest thing for me and would look good on a resume, which was pro tennis.
Yeah.
After having not played for about 4 or 5 years, I actually trained for maybe like 2 months and went back on tour. Played for about a year. And then after that, ended up coaching college tennis at University of the Pacific. A friend of mine was running the program there, and she'd asked me to come join her coaching staff, work with her as I kind of transitioned out to figure out what I wanted to do. And then after that, I joined a tech startup in San Francisco.
Oh, nice.
Called Keep Truckin'. I was actually at the pre-qualification for the U.S. Open, and I knew this was my last tournament, and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I'd heard of startups, heard of, kind of that they were this kind of cool, big thing in terms of, you get to come in, kind of be in a small team, help to build a company, get some equity, and, maybe it becomes worth something.
Yeah.
And so I joined Keep Truckin'. I was with them for about 2 years before moving on to another tech startup that I recently left in April to focus full-time on my business. I don't know if that was 5 minutes. That might have been a lot longer.
Oh, it's all good. It's all good. It's quite an interesting story. It's definitely what would you say your favorite place was where you did where you went on tournaments?
Oh wow. Honestly, people ask that all the time, and it's difficult to say because I'm so cliche in the fact that I really liked each place that I went. I mean, not every place, but most of the places I went to in terms of just culture and beauty. So it's tough for me to say, but I'm gonna force myself to pick. Probably, honestly, maybe Portugal. The coast was really beautiful, and it had a lot of just kind of history and culture to it. So that one stands out. And then I also really enjoyed Germany. That's my kind of heritage and where my mom and my grandmother are from. So
yeah,
kind of my motherland.
I'm kind of jealous. I've been to Mexico one time my whole life, and besides other cities in the country and other states, I haven't left. And me and my wife have talked about it, but now that we have a 3-month-old, it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, guess we're kind of waiting on that for a few more years.
Yeah, right. Well, I hope that you guys do get to get out in travel, because for me, that's kind of what I always still hold to my heart, and helps to kind of expand, in your thinking and your views on the world.
It does.
But yeah, Mexico's awesome too.
So what would you say right now with you making the transition to your business? What would you say the most exciting part, not just with your business, but with your family and things of that are right now?
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's, controlling my life. like taking control, not feeling like I am, essentially working for somebody else where I'm having to kind of report in. And even though I wasn't at a job that was a clock-in job, you still get that kind of sense that you're, having to show up at a certain time, leave at a certain time, show face for a certain amount of time. And I had just kind of got to a feeling where I felt like I wasn't really in control and living the life I wanted to live.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably the biggest and best part, is that I feel like I've taken that control back, and I've now been able to design my days that honestly are the most productive for me. So it might be a few hours in the morning where I'm, going to my Qigong class and then doing a meditation and taking my dog out for a walk. And it might be, 4 hours, and I might not start work until 11. But I know that block that I have for work is going to be really productive and valuable.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that. And then I got a dog a few months ago, so spending time with her and kind of seeing the world through her eyes has been a lot of fun.
What kind of dog is she?
She's a husky mix.
Ooh, a husky.
Yeah, so she has these really piercing blue eyes that people love to stop and, compliment her on, and she knows she has these pretty eyes. She just works it. And we have no idea what she's really mixed with after that. Cause she's probably a lab. She's got like a lab coat, but she's really
nice.
pretty and cute.
I've always wanted a husky. I've always heard. I've heard there are rumors, but a husky Pomeranian mix, because they just look like small husky dogs.
Oh wow!
But I heard I kind of heard that they're kind of just a rumor. But so who knows? Maybe one day. I heard they're a lot of money and they're really hard to get your hands on if you can find one. But we have a couple of animals ourselves. Both of them are getting pretty old now, and my wife is at the point now that we have the child where she's like, I can't wait till they die, and I'm like, that's so bad to say. It's like it all went to the baby.
Oh my gosh! I mean, it is a lot of work. I don't have any children yet, but she's like my practice child.
Yeah. So what would you say, being an athlete, what would help you best describe a really good athlete brand? I know you've mentioned someone when you were in the athletic, when you were still playing tennis, and you probably still do it on some accord, but what do you have someone you look up to when it comes to that they were an athlete and maybe they've gone out and kind of opened their own business?
Yeah, interesting. So I guess kind of the two parts of that. I think a good brand to me is one that's authentic. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really, at least I think it's really easy to sniff out, kind of a brand or an athlete that isn't being authentic. Mm-hmm. So I think it starts with that. And I think it's one that also kind of, it is more than the sport. So isn't really focused on the fact that they are, a basketball player, a tennis player, but what are they doing outside of that? What are their interests and passions outside of that? Yeah. And I think someone who's honestly just killing it is LeBron James. And I know that that's kind of almost like the easy answer. But I think, with his school that he's opened, and it's showing, something that's completely outside of basketball, but using his brand and his platform, from uninterrupted to where it's giving athletes kind of this voice that maybe in the past has been silenced. Yeah. And to talk about things beyond the sports, right? So he's kind of more than an athlete. And then, he's involved in a lot of different investments that again are outside of sports. So, whether it's his, I think, Blaze Pizza, or two different tech companies. He's kind of involved in a whole lot of different things and really big on social media. I think there's not a day that he doesn't put some live post on Instagram. Yeah. Typically where he's just dancing to music, but it's authentic to himself and creating that narrative and that brand for him.
It's kind of mixing that lifestyle branding with the corporate brand. Lifestyle branding's become so big in these days and ages, but I feel like on the other note, you have the corporate brands that got to a point where they can sniff out, we'll just say, prospects that don't take, industry seriously. So it's trying to find that nice balance of, hey, I'm still authentic, but I do run a business. I am professional, and I agree with you. And I think that a lot of athletes, similar to yourself, they want to find a passion that relates to what they did because they loved it, and then trying to move that over, not 100% be about the sport itself, but still use some of the mentality and some of the ethics that they took from that in building a business out of it. Being able to be passionate about helping children, helping other athletes, helping other individuals, and helping fans see they get to leverage that social media where an online presence where a lot of other industries don't. They have to spend a lot of money to do so. So yeah. I 100% agree with you. And LeBron James is a good one, and it's kind of hard because you do kind of see it's hard to take away the fan aspect and look at it more as a business aspect, because sometimes you do see him on the court and you're like, oh, well, he doesn't look like he's that nice of a guy. But at the same time, that's what the brand awareness is for, you know, so he can go out and still tell people, you know. So you kind of already answered the next question. So when you look across athlete landscape right now, what's the one thing that you think more athletes should be doing right now?
Yeah, finding interests and passions outside of their sport. You know, and I think that, again, you know, with kind of borrowing the phrase more than athlete, I don't think that's a LeBron phrase. He's kind of made it more popular, but I've used this phrase really for a long time as well, because you have to be more than an athlete. If your identity gets wrapped around the fact, like it did for me, where it was just, I'm just a tennis player, you don't know a world outside of that. And so I think, and we're starting to see more of it, but I think the best thing athletes can do is develop passions outside of their sport. Whether that's from, you know, literally like a physical standpoint, maybe they really love yoga, or they love wine, or they, you know, are passionate about political reform, or whatever it might be. I think finding something that they have an interest in and leveraging off of that.
Yeah, I definitely feel like the biggest struggle when it comes to athletes is that similar to the pain point that you had, where they get to a point where they're like, well, what do I do now? And it's really hard because you get this up where you make a lot of money, where people like myself that open a business, they start small unless they get a huge investment, and they grow slowly. So they learn all those pain points with no money instead of a lot of money. And being able to, like you said, find something not at that last second, not when they're, you know, about to retire or they've retired and saying, what am I going to do now? Thinking about it maybe a couple years in advance. And yes, I always say, you know, you kind of have to pay attention to your sport when you're in the sport, of course. That's your main focus. But divide maybe 10% of it for 2 years and invest in just trying to develop that and learn some skills and start using your digital platform more to reach more of an influence and more fans. Because at the end of the day, those fans are more likely going to become your from a business aspect, they're probably going to become your customers towards the end of the day, because they trust you and they understand you. So when it comes to going off of the last question, what's your best advice for athletes that want to leverage their personal brands?
Yeah, I mean, without the sake of sounding redundant, I think it's first and foremost finding something outside of the sport. And it kind of sounds easy to do, but yet, you know, I work with a lot of athletes where they really have kind of never done anything outside of that, right? So even if you hear my story, I mean, I started at 4, and at the age of, you know, 7 or 8, knew this was going to be my life, and it was my life. From the first thing when I woke up to going out and working out to literally being at school, all I'm thinking about is tennis and my practices. The second the bell rings, it's like going to practice, at the courts all day, coming home. Often I didn't even really do homework. It was kind of shower and then into my stretches and my, you know, rehab exercise routine to do it over again. So there was no time to build any kind of passions or interest. And so, you know, I think it really is just making the time. And in some ways, maybe that was a detriment to me, because it was only tunnel vision on tennis.
Yeah,
so
and that's what it seems like.
Develop these outside passions. It would have actually given me a little bit of a breather and recovery to then kind of be actually better at my sport. So I think that, you know, having those outside passions are going to actually help in a ton of different ways, not just with, you know, your brand and your business, but also probably your mental side as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I see a lot of similarities when being from both sides. I feel like being an athlete is very similar to being in the corporate world, where you do have people telling you what to do. They tell you how to, you know, eat. They tell you how to do your regimen depending on what sport you're in. They tell you when practice is. They tell you where you have to go. And so you kind of have people that help you along the way when you get out and you The corporate world is very similar, but being in your own business, you don't have those people. So you need to find people that are willing to help you get motivated and even help you along the way. And of course, watching out for the people that are trying to take hundreds and thousands of dollars from you.
Yeah, I think on that note, and I think this is kind of what you're getting to, and I think another suggestion that I would have in building off that is, I think, building a team around you.
Yeah.
Because again, when I just think of my own story, it was pretty isolated. Tennis in itself is an individual sport. And yes, I had my coaches, and I even had a nutritionist and a sports psychologist and a actual coach, for my skills. But yet, I didn't really have a team around me that kind of really supported me as a whole, and as a person. Kind of like, how's Kady feeling today?
Yeah.
And what's going on in your world? And so while all the other team members were certainly valuable members to my team, I think building out a team as well that's really there for you as a whole person is going to be a huge component to any athlete's success.
And I think the corporate world, me being in the corporate world, I think that you come to see you have that bigger talk. So when you're as an athlete, you have other people to talk to. But once you go into starting your own business, you kind of get to a point where you're like, I've become a loner, and then you get on the phone with people that may even be salesmen. I've gotten on the phone with people that are trying to sell me something, and I bicker their ear off for like 20 minutes just because I have no one to talk to, So finding, those teammates that can help you build around your business mentally as well. I mean, I tell my wife all the time, I go to a counselor. I don't feel anything's wrong with it. I feel like I always tell her, I'm like, hey, you're always going to have your opinion towards me. My friends are always going to be opinionated towards me. It's just how society works. And so you need to find someone that you can kind of talk to. It's nice to have someone you can talk to that has an unbiased opinion on anything you say, and being able to say, no, you're wrong, or no, work on that a little bit. And finding in the corporate world, I've really seen, not in the corporate world, but in the business, I've really seen a lot of companies trying to hire real cheap and going so for the route of, hey, I'm going to hire someone hourly, or I'm going to hire someone to do this, when in reality, it's like, well, if you tried to hire someone full time, you're going to at least be paying them $30,000 a year. So try to find individuals or companies that may be able to, you can leverage multiple demographics from. And help you with multiple things at once and be able to motivate you. I'm really trying to push my business, and I know we've talked about this in the past, towards having a program where I just kind of help keep you motivated towards certain directions. If you don't have enough money to pay for my services, then hey, I'll be there for you and tell you how to set you accountable, really. Accountability program to kind of set you forward with that, because you need people to kind of tell you what. Sometimes I'd like to have someone where I can just, even with my own stuff, painter doesn't paint his own house, and having someone I can say, should I do this or this? And just giving me an answer, because I just sit there and I dwell on it for months and months, saying I don't want to do it unless I do it right,
Yeah.
So with that, from the digital aspect, is there any tools used, and maybe you can explain a little bit about what you do in your business now, that, and some of the tools you may use to help you in your business development?
Yeah, certainly. So today I run a coaching business, kind of with a few different streams. So one of them, and kind of my main one, being working one-on-one with current and retired professional athletes. And actually, I should say more elite athletes. I have also a lot of clients that were former Division I athletes who maybe thought they were going to go pro, or never envisioned or thought about life after sport. And then it, came upon them. And my primary focus is working with athletes to find their authentic self. So a lot of that work is around identity. And sorry, that was my phone ringing in the background.
Doesn't stop, right?
I'm very sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
So yes, working with athletes on finding their authentic self, and transitioning to life after sport. So again, this might be in the passions or interests, but a lot of it is really just around identity. We get so stuck in our identity being wrapped around us being an athlete that a lot of us don't actually know who we are. And then once you kind of know who you are, we're malleable, we can change. Then there's the question of, well, who do you want to be? And then actually putting in place a plan and a kind of blueprint to actually become that person. So a lot of my work is around that. And then I also work with universities in
nice.
a course that I've created called Beyond the Game. And this takes different shapes for different universities, but I would say kind of primarily built around the same premise, with a lot of the focus really being on that identity portion. As far as tools that I leverage for my business, I would say LinkedIn. It's a great tool. I think, matter of fact, that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
And I've gotten clients off of there, and other partnerships and collaborations. Just really interesting conversations where I've got to learn about different things that kind of are still involved in sports, but not in maybe my forte or my expertise. And another tool is actually another one that we're using right now, which is Zoom. I use that for pretty much all of my coaching calls. It allows me to work with clients anywhere in the world. But it's also great for being able to record if you're going to do a webinar, or you want to do a podcast, or just certain posts. They make it really simple and easy.
Yeah, we're kind of using that right now too. Free branding for Zoom.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. And it's really nice because when we first met, we just talked on the phone. So it was really nice to put a face to the name as well. Because I feel like that's one thing that happens with in our day and age, is that so many people look at other people just as I'm not going to say things, but they kind of do, because they meet them over online and they think, that they're just another, person out there. And a lot of times people can be pretty harsh. And so it's nice to put, faces to names and really realize, oh, these people have personalities.
That's right. Yeah.
So the last question is that I have for you is, what do you see the future being for an athlete branding and marketing when it comes to with how technology has gotten better and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think in the future we're going to start to see more well-rounded athletes. So where the focal point isn't necessarily just on their sport, but it is going to be a lot on their extracurricular, their interests, their passions, their kind of social justice areas that they have strong feelings in. I think it's just going to become more well-rounded overall. Where the sport's almost taking like a backseat, it's just going to become their platform.
Yeah.
So that's what's going to kind of give them their name. But I think as far as what's going to differentiate and separate, it's going to be everything that's extracurricular and outside. And then I think, of course, social media. I have mixed feelings about it. And I know a lot of athletes are utilizing it. I follow a lot of those athletes. And I watch their content, and it certainly gives me images of their brands and helps me to determine kind of which athletes I become a big fan of and maybe ones I don't.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a kind of culmination of the social media and outside the sport factors.
And it always depends too on where social media goes. It's changing so fast that pretty soon we're probably going to have, social media like in our eyeballs and stuff like that,
I hope not.
We already have it in our watch and, fitness trackers and all that nifty stuff. So, well, I want to thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's funny, you're the second person that's mentioned LinkedIn as their favorite, their most utilized platform. So that's something for anyone watching this to really look at as they continue to grow their business. And again, I want to thank you. Do you want to let everyone know again where they could possibly find you, follow you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn. It's Kady Pooler, Kady, and then Pooler, Pooler. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's @Kady Pooler.